The sky above Washington, D.C. turned bright green the moment the Telluri ship entered Earth's atmosphere. It moved slowly, with lights flashing like a storm, and settled gently over a secured military base. Crowds gathered behind barriers. News cameras rolled. Soldiers stood ready, unsure whether to aim or salute. It was Earth's first open contact with a powerful alien race. The Telluri Empire had finally decided to visit humanity, but they didn't come to attack. At least, not in the way people expected. A voice echoed through every speaker on the base. It was smooth, clear, and carried a strange tone of amusement. "We are the Telluri. We have watched your kind struggle. We have seen your machines break and your muscles fail. Now we offer a challenge, a test of body and spirit." When the ship doors opened, 6 tall figures stepped out. Their skin was smooth and silver blue. Their eyes glowed yellow. They wore suits that shimmered like liquid metal, and they walked with graceful, floating steps. At the front stood Captain Zara. She was slim and fast-looking, her head held high with a sharp smile that showed no fear, only confidence. She looked at the humans lined up in front of her, as if studying a new kind of pet. General Mason stepped forward from the human side, keeping a straight face. "Welcome to Earth," he said. Captain Zara tilted her head. "Thank you. We came not for war, but for sport. Let us see what your species can do." The aliens had brought their own media. Tiny floating drones circled in the air, recording everything. One hovered near a Telluri warrior who flexed his muscles dramatically. The other aliens laughed. They were not being rude. In their minds, this truly was a game. The Telluri had never met a race weaker than humans. On their home planet, gravity was low, and everyone could jump high, run fast, and move like dancers. Earth, to them, was a heavy, slow place. Watching humans struggle in their own gravity was like watching snails try to race cheetahs. The first contest was speed. On a flat open field, both species lined up. From the Telluri side, a young male named Luro took his position. His legs were long and lean. He bounced in place, barely touching the ground. From the human side, a professional runner named Jamie prepared to run. She stretched quietly, trying not to look at the alien beside her. A countdown began. 3, 2, 1. They took off. Luro dashed forward with lightning speed. He seemed to float as he ran, barely feeling the weight of Earth. Jamie ran hard, fast as any human could, but the Telluri reached the finish line, several seconds ahead. The aliens clapped and laughed, making jokes in their own language. A translator drone repeated their words in English. "Cute effort. Very cute." Jamie shook her head, catching her breath. "That guy's legs are made of springs." The second event was agility. Obstacle courses were set up, with climbing walls, tunnels, and balance beams. Humans gave it their best. But again, the Telluri moved like water, flipping, twisting, and gliding through every part of the course. Even Earth's stronger gravity didn't slow them down much. They made it look easy. "Is this the best you have?" Captain Zara asked General Mason, her voice filled with fake concern. "We hoped for a challenge." Mason kept his cool. "You've seen what we can do, but you haven't seen everything." He called over a young man named Reese. He wasn't fast. He wasn't flashy, but his arms were thick with muscle, and his back looked like a wall of stone. "Weightlifting," Mason said simply. The aliens whispered among themselves. One stepped forward. Tarn, a strong Telluri warrior with a proud grin. Massive weights were brought out. The challenge was simple: who could lift the heaviest metal block from the ground? Tarn went first. He crouched low, gripped the base of the black iron cube, and pulled. His face tightened. Muscles strained. The block rose, slowly, then dropped with a loud thud. The alien groaned. Sweat rolled down his face. Then Reese stepped forward. He didn't even stretch. He just bent down, grabbed the same block, and lifted it in one strong motion. He held it at his waist for 5 seconds, then dropped it without effort. The humans cheered. Even the alien cameras zoomed in, surprised. Reese just smiled and walked off like it was nothing. The aliens said nothing for a moment. Then one muttered, "Strange. He should not be that strong." Captain Zara narrowed her eyes. "It's gravity," she whispered to her second-in-command. "They live under this pressure every day. Their bodies, they're heavier, built different." Still, the Telieri kept laughing. "One strong man doesn't prove much," they said. So, the next challenge was power endurance, carrying weights over long distances. The aliens were confident again, but halfway through the test, 2 of them collapsed from exhaustion. The humans, still sweating and breathing hard, kept going. One alien tried to stand and fell again. His knees buckled. I can't," he muttered. "This place is too heavy." Captain Zara was not laughing anymore. She watched her warriors fall behind and started to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: doubt. The final event of the day was hand-to-hand combat. Not to hurt each other, just a simple pushing match, like sumo wrestling. The goal: push your opponent out of the ring. Captain Zara herself entered the ring, ready to show Earth who was boss. Her opponent was a soldier named Elena, smaller than Zara, but stocky and solid. The match began. Zara lunged forward. She was fast, but as soon as she pushed, she realized something was wrong. Elena barely moved. Zara tried again, this time using both hands, but her feet slipped slightly. Earth's gravity was pulling her down, harder than she was used to. Her legs began to shake. Then Elena pushed back. It was like a wall had hit her. Zara stumbled, lost balance, and fell out of the ring. The crowd went silent. Even the alien drones paused. General Mason stepped forward with a small smile. "It's not always about speed. Sometimes it's about where you come from. And we come from a planet that pulls us down every second of our lives." The aliens didn't laugh anymore. That night in their ship, they ran tests on human biology. Muscle density, bone strength, lung capacity. Everything pointed to one truth: humans were not weak. They were forged by gravity. Their own planet's constant force had made them tough, durable, and powerful in ways no light gravity species could match. Zara stared at the data, then looked out the window at Earth's night sky. "We thought they were slow," she whispered. "We didn't see. They're carrying the weight of a planet on their backs." Outside, Reese walked past the alien ship, yawning, muscles still tight after the lifting match. He glanced up at the ship and gave it a lazy wave. Zara's jaw tightened. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. After the first day of competition, the Telieri were not laughing anymore. The humans had shocked them with their strength, their endurance, and their resilience. They had underestimated Earth's gravity, and in doing so, had underestimated humanity itself. But Captain Zara was not one to admit defeat. She stood in front of her warriors, frowning at the data on their screens. The tests had proven something she hadn't expected. Humans were more powerful than they seemed. "Gravity," Zara whispered to herself. "It's not just a force. It's a weapon." Her second-in-command, Tarn, approached cautiously. "Captain, we must rethink our strategy. The humans are not weak, not at all. They are far stronger than we realized." Zara nodded but remained silent. She knew Tarn was right. The competition had been one-sided, but the humans had shown something more. It wasn't just their strength or endurance. It was their ability to adapt. Humans didn't back down. They pushed forward, even when the odds were against them. On the human side, General Mason had been watching the results with a mixture of pride and concern. The aliens had shown their power, but so had his soldiers. The problem was, the Telieri were not just here for a friendly challenge anymore. The tension in the air was thick, and it felt like something bigger was coming. He turned to his trusted officer, Commander Reese. "We need to prepare. I don't think they'll leave this time, Mason said, his voice low. Reese nodded. They won't stop until they've tested every limit. Mason sighed. And we need to show them that humans can handle whatever comes next. That night, the aliens stayed inside their ship, discussing the strange creatures they had encountered on Earth. The results of the challenges were clear. They had misjudged the humans. The next day, they would challenge the humans once more, but this time, it would be different. Zara wasn't about to give up. The humans had won most of the contests, but Zara had noticed something strange during the hand-to-hand combat. It wasn't just that humans were strong. It was that they could endure. They could take a hit and still keep going. On her planet, speed and agility were everything. But on Earth, it was something else entirely. Endurance. The next morning, the Telluri were ready for the next test, but this time they weren't laughing. Zara stood before General Mason and his team. Today, we will test your limits. The challenge is simple. We will see who can survive longer in the most extreme conditions we can create. Mason raised an eyebrow. Extreme conditions? You mean you'll send us into a volcano? Zara smiled thinly. Not quite. But we will make sure you feel the pressure. The challenge began. The Telluri had set up a series of environmental tests. High winds, freezing temperatures, extreme heat, and underwater endurance. At first, the humans were confident. They had faced the cold before, fought through storms, and trained in harsh conditions. But the Telluri had prepared something different. They started with the cold. Temperatures dropped to near zero in seconds. The wind howled, cutting through clothes like sharp blades. The humans were used to discomfort, but this was different. The Telluri, however, didn't even seem to notice the cold. They were prepared for it. Their bodies didn't shiver. They just moved on, walking through the storm with ease. Captain Zara stood nearby, watching. She expected the humans to struggle. But she was surprised to see one of the soldiers, Alina, keeping pace with them despite the freezing winds. The cold was powerful, but Alina pushed through it, her face red but determined. The next test was heat. The temperature soared to nearly 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat was unbearable. Sweat poured from the humans' faces, and their skin felt like it was burning. But still, they pressed on. Reese, who had already proven his strength, was once again the last man standing, refusing to give up. Zara looked over at her warriors. Tarn, the strongest of the Telluri, was sweating. His muscles were tense, and his breathing was labored. The heat didn't bother the Telluri as much as it did the humans, but the difference was noticeable. The humans were used to extremes. They lived on a planet with intense weather. They had learned how to survive through it all. The Telluri were not used to this kind of heat. After hours in the heat, Zora called an end to the test. The humans had passed, though barely. Alina, Reese, and the others were exhausted, but they were alive. The Telluri, however, looked uncomfortable. Tarn's face was pale. His legs shook. Your kind is resilient, Zora admitted quietly, stepping up to General Mason. Mason smiled but didn't say anything. The next test was the most dangerous, underwater endurance. The humans were thrown into deep waters, with the pressure building as they descended. The Telluri seemed to glide down, their bodies easily adapting to the pressure. But the humans? They struggled at first, their lungs burning as the pressure grew. But just when it seemed like the humans couldn't go any further, something incredible happened. Reese, who had been struggling, found a rhythm. He focused on his breathing, pushing through the pain. His body adapted. He kept moving deeper and deeper into the water, while the Telluri watched in stunned silence. Zara couldn't believe it. The humans were used to pressure, to pain. They were pushing through something that should have been impossible for them. They were not fast. They were not agile. But they had something else. Determination. As Reese reached the deepest point, the Telluri began to panic. They didn't understand how he was doing it. They were used to technology and speed, not pure human will. They tried to send him a signal, but it didn't reach him. Finally, Reese emerged, gasping for air, his body aching but alive. The humans had won again. Zara couldn't believe it. The humans had done something no one expected. They had endured. Back on the surface, General Mason looked at Zara. "The human spirit is a strange thing," he said softly. "We don't back down. We fight. And when we fight, we win." Zara nodded, her face serious. "We didn't think you were strong. But now, I see what makes you different. It's not just your muscles. It's your will to survive, to fight." The Tellierii stood in silence. They had come to Earth thinking they were the superior race, thinking they could outsmart the humans in every test. But they had learned something. They had learned that Earth's gravity wasn't the only thing that made humans strong. It was their will to fight, to survive. And that was something the Tellierii had never experienced before. After the intense tests, the Tellierii could no longer ignore the fact that humans were not like any species they had encountered. The trials were supposed to prove humanity's weakness, but each test seemed to turn into a showcase of human resilience. Captain Zara had never expected this. Every time she thought the humans had reached their limit, they pushed through, surprising her again and again. The Tellierii had expected a show of weakness, but instead they were seeing something they couldn't quite comprehend: the strength of the human spirit. Zara stood on the observation deck of the Tellierii ship, her gaze fixed on the planet below. Earth. The humans had beaten them at their own game. The competition was supposed to be a test of power, a way to prove Tellierii superiority. But it had turned into something much more complicated. The humans were tough in a way that made Zara uneasy. Her second-in-command, Tarn, joined her on the deck. "Captain, we need to talk." Zara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What is it, Tarn?" "We underestimated them," Tarn said bluntly. "We thought we would come here, challenge them, and leave with victory. But they've proven something we didn't expect. The strength of their bodies is one thing, but the strength of their minds, that's something else." Zara sighed and walked toward the control panels. "I know. Their endurance, it's not normal. They survive in conditions that should have destroyed them by now." Tarn nodded. "I think it's time we stop thinking of this as a competition and start thinking of it as something more dangerous. They are not just tough. They're capable of overcoming anything. We're facing a species that can push past limits we can't even imagine." Zara looked down at the planet below. "Then let's test them even harder. We still haven't pushed them to their breaking point." The next day, the humans were called for another challenge. This time, the Tellierii had prepared something different, a test of their psychological endurance. The aliens had decided to put the humans under extreme mental stress. They knew that if they could break the human spirits, they would win. Physical strength alone wouldn't be enough. They had to find the breaking point. The humans were led into a dark chamber inside the Tellierii ship. The walls were made of smooth, shiny metal, and the floor seemed to vibrate slightly under their feet. At first, it was just strange noises, like whispers coming from all directions. Then came flashes of light, blinding white light followed by pitch darkness. It was a trick to disorient them. The humans had to stay calm, to fight the panic creeping into their minds. But even the most disciplined soldiers felt the pressure. Captain Zara watched through the ship's monitors. She wanted to see how the humans would respond. How far could they go before they cracked? At first, the humans tried to stay together. Reese and Mason kept close to their teams, trying to offer words of encouragement. "Stay strong," Reese said, his voice steady. "We've been through worse. This is just another challenge." But then the walls seemed to close in. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the cold began to bite at their skin. Their breath became visible in the air. One by one, the soldiers began to shiver, some of them starting to lose focus. The walls pulsed with strange lights, and eerie voices whispered in their ears. It wasn't just the physical challenges that the Talieri had planned. It was this mental game, a test of how much fear and confusion a human mind could take. One soldier, a young man named Ben, clutched his head and dropped to his knees. The whispers grew louder, the lights flashing faster. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out, but the pressure was too much. His body trembled, and he fell to the ground in panic. But then something happened. Instead of giving up, Ben forced himself to breathe slowly. He shut out the voices. He focused on the feeling of the cold on his skin, the sound of his own breath. He was not alone. The others began to do the same. They pushed past the fear and confusion, one breath at a time. And with every second, they grew stronger. They refused to break. Zara watched, stunned. She had expected them to fall apart. They were supposed to be weak, to be easily manipulated by their fear. But the humans did something no one expected. They fought their own minds, pushed through their panic, and began to calm themselves. Slowly, the lights dimmed, and the whispers faded. Ben stood up first, wiping his brow, his face pale but determined. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice low but steady. "We're not giving up." General Mason stood beside him, smiling faintly. "We never do." The Talieri had tried to break their minds, but instead, they had made them stronger. The humans had passed the mental endurance test, proving once again that their will to survive and endure was far stronger than the Talieri had anticipated. After that challenge, Captain Zara was quiet. She had never seen a species like this before. Humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving under pressure. It was as though they had an inner strength that nothing could take away. Tarn stood beside her again. "What now, Captain? They've passed every test we've thrown at them." Zara turned to him, her face unreadable. "We need to try something else. We'll take the fight to them." The next test was the hardest yet. The Talieri had decided to bring out their most powerful weapon, gravity manipulation. They would increase the gravitational force in the area, turning it into an environment so heavy that even the Talieri could barely stand. The humans were brought to a large arena, where a machine hummed with energy. The moment it powered up, gravity on the surface increased threefold. The air became thick. The humans could feel the weight of their own bodies pressing down on them. They struggled to stand, their muscles protesting. Even Reese, who had lifted the heaviest weights, felt his legs buckle. The pressure was immense. Captain Zara watched closely. She thought this was the final test. There was no way the humans could survive this. The Talieri were used to gravity manipulation. They could fight in conditions like this. But the humans, how could they possibly survive? But then something unexpected happened. Reese, struggling to stay upright, looked around at his fellow soldiers. He could see the strain in their eyes. He could see the weight of the world pressing down on them, making every step feel like they were moving through quicksand. But he also saw something else. He saw the same resolve in their faces that he had seen before, determination. Reese lifted his head, his neck straining against the pressure. He clenched his fists and took a step forward, then another. Slowly, the other soldiers followed. One by one, they stood up straighter. The Talieri had thought they would break under the pressure, but the humans refused to fall. The gravity was too much for the Talieri to ignore. They wavered, faltering under the immense weight. But the humans, though struggling, kept moving. Their muscles burned, their breath labored, but they never stopped. It was clear now. Humans could adapt to anything. Captain Zara stood silent for a long moment, her mind racing. She had seen their physical strength. She had seen their endurance. But now she had seen something else. The human spirit. It was something that no alien power could conquer. The Talieri were not used to failure. But this wasn't just about winning a challenge. It was about recognizing that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in speed or power. It's in the heart. Zara took a deep breath and turned to Tarn. "Prepare for the final challenge." It's time we show them what true power means. But in her heart, even she wasn't sure if the Telluri would win anymore. The next day, the humans woke to a new kind of challenge. The Telluri were no longer interested in testing the limits of human strength or endurance. They had seen enough. The humans had proved that they could handle extreme environments, intense pressure, and physical pain. No, the Telluri had decided it was time for something else, a final test, one that would truly push the humans to their limits. Captain Zara stood in front of the human forces, her expression grim. She had grown to respect them over the past few days, but respect wasn't enough to win this challenge. She wasn't about to let the humans walk away thinking they could defeat the Telluri in everything. The time had come for the final test. We will now test your ability to survive without your planet's gravity, Zara announced, her voice cold but clear. There was a murmur among the humans. General Mason exchanged a look with his officers, his face tightening in concern. The Telluri had never asked for such a challenge before. It was one thing to face extreme conditions, but to lose the very force that held them to the ground. That was something else entirely. We will be removing Earth's gravity, Zora continued. You will be sent to our ship's artificial gravity chamber. There you will face an environment that even we struggle to navigate. We want to see how long you can last. Mason took a deep breath. He knew the challenge was dangerous. Without Earth's gravity, their bodies would feel weightless, floating in the air like fish out of water. They would have to move without the heavy pull of gravity to guide them. It was going to be hard. We've trained for zero gravity before, Reese said, speaking for the group. We'll do it. But even Reese wasn't sure what they were about to face. This wasn't just about floating in space. It was about surviving in a world without the constant force of gravity pressing them down. It would change everything. Inside the Telluri ship, the gravity chamber was like nothing the humans had ever seen. The walls of the room were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and the floor seemed to ripple like liquid. At first, the humans were unsure of how to move. Without gravity pulling them down, their bodies floated in the air. They kicked off walls, trying to get their bearings, but everything felt wrong. Their arms and legs flailed, trying to grab onto something solid. The Telluri warriors stood nearby, watching. They were used to environments like this, their bodies trained for weightlessness. But the humans struggled. They weren't accustomed to it. Their minds fought the unnatural feeling of floating. Every movement felt wrong, like they were walking underwater. But there was something in the human spirit that refused to be defeated. Reese was the first to regain his balance. He pushed off a wall, floating smoothly through the air, his eyes scanning the room. Slowly, other soldiers began to follow his example. They focused on their breathing, their movements slowing down until they began to move with a strange kind of grace. It was difficult at first. Their bodies weren't built for zero gravity. They had never had to think about every movement, every breath. But the humans adapted quickly. They learned to use their hands and feet to push themselves forward, to float across the room without hitting walls or ceilings. The Telluri had expected them to panic, to give up, but they didn't. They fought against their own instincts, learning how to live in a world without gravity. Their minds, strong from years of surviving on Earth's heavy surface, adjusted to this strange new feeling. It wasn't easy, but they were doing it. Zara watched them from a control panel. She had expected them to fail, to give up after a few minutes of struggling. But the humans kept going. They didn't stop. Even in the weightlessness of the chamber, their determination was unshakable. Zara frowned, trying to hide her frustration. After hours of floating, pushing, and learning, the humans had mastered the chamber. They were moving as one unit, each person gliding through the room with ease. The Telluri had never seen anything like it. The humans had faced every challenge they had thrown at them. And now, they had conquered the impossible. Back on Earth, the news had spread. The world had been watching the challenge. News outlets from every corner of the globe had broadcasted the Telluri's tests. The humans had been expected to fail. But they hadn't. In cities around the world, people watched in awe. They saw soldiers, farmers, scientists, and everyday citizens struggling in zero gravity, fighting against an environment they had never experienced. But they also saw something else. They saw unity. They saw humans working together, never giving up, always pushing forward. And now, as the humans floated in the chamber, they had proven something that no one had expected. Earth's gravity wasn't just a force that held them down. It was a force that made them stronger. General Mason stood before his team, his face worn but proud. "We've done it," he said quietly. "We've shown them that we can endure. That no matter what, we keep going. We never stop." The humans had faced the Telluri's greatest test, and they had passed. But as Zara stared at the monitors, she realized that this wasn't just about winning. This was about something deeper. The humans had faced every challenge they had thrown at them, and they had done so with something the Telluri could never understand: the will to survive. Zara turned to Tarn, her face serious. "They've done it. They've shown us something we didn't know we needed to see." Tarn's eyes widened. "What are you saying, Captain?" Zara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm saying that they're not just a species we can conquer. They're a species we can learn from." The Telluri had arrived on Earth with arrogance and pride, expecting to prove their dominance. They had come to test the humans, to show the universe that they were the superior race. But now, after seeing the humans face every challenge with unbreakable strength, they knew that they had underestimated the power of Earth's gravity and the power of humanity. Zara turned and faced her people. "We've learned something here. The humans are not weak. They are stronger than we thought. We will not underestimate them again." The Telluri had come to Earth thinking they could break humanity. But now, they knew better. The final test had come and gone, and with it, the humans had won. But the Telluri had not just seen human strength. They had learned something much more profound about the species they had once laughed at. The challenge wasn't over, though. It had only just begun. Captain Zara stood in the main control room of the Telluri ship, staring at the monitors that showed the humans below. They were back on Earth, having passed every test, proving that their strength, endurance, and mind were something beyond what the Telluri had ever encountered. Tarn stood beside her, his face troubled. "Captain, what do we do now?" Zora's eyes were fixed on the humans, who were slowly starting to return to their normal lives. They had endured the harshest tests the Telluri could come up with, and they had won. It was a victory, not just in the competition, but in the battle for respect. Zara had never expected this. She had thought they would break, that humanity would bow to the Telluri's superior technology and power. But now, it was clear that the humans had something else, something the Telluri could never take away. "We have to change our approach," Zara said softly, her voice calm but firm. "We came here to prove we were superior. But instead, we've learned something we did not expect. The humans are more than just a race to conquer. They're a force we must respect." Tarn looked at her in disbelief. "Respect? We can't just walk away from this. We have to decide what happens next." Zara nodded slowly. "The universe will never be the same after this. The humans have shown us something. They have the strength to endure, the will to survive, and the spirit to never back down. We cannot ignore that." Back on Earth, things were changing. The news of the Telluri's tests and the way humanity had overcome them had spread to every corner of the world. People in every country were talking about what had happened, and they were united by one thing: pride. Humans had proved themselves. They had shown that they were more than capable of standing up to any threat. They had won the respect of the universe. General Mason, now a hero in his own right, stood on the steps of a building, giving a speech to a crowd of cheering people. "We didn't just survive. We thrived. We showed the galaxy what humanity is capable of. We will never back down. And now we stand ready for whatever comes next." The crowd erupted into applause. The people of Earth were united, stronger than ever. They had passed the tests, and they had done it together. No one could take that away from them. As for Captain Zara, she found herself in an unusual position. She was a warrior, a leader used to seeing her people win. But this time, she had learned something new. The Telieri had always relied on their technology and power, but they had underestimated the human spirit. They had learned that no matter how strong their weapons or tactics were, they could not break a people who were willing to fight for their survival, no matter the odds. Zara turned to Tarn. The humans have shown us their strength. We need to be ready for what comes next. Tarn looked at her, understanding now what she meant. The Telieri had underestimated Earth's gravity, and more importantly, the humans who called it home. You're right, Captain. We've learned something. We can't conquer them the way we thought we could. They'll fight back. Zara nodded. It's time we stop looking at them as an enemy and start looking at them as equals. The Telieri ship departed Earth, but this time they did not leave with the same arrogance they had arrived with. They left with respect. Respect for the humans who had stood their ground, who had fought back against every challenge the Telieri had thrown at them. As the Telieri ships disappeared into the vastness of space, the people of Earth celebrated. They had faced the impossible and overcome it. Humanity had proven itself to the universe. In the end, Earth's gravity had not just held the people to the ground. It had shaped them, forged them into something stronger than anyone had imagined. The Telieri had laughed at them, thinking they were weak. But now, as they looked back at Earth from the edge of the stars, they knew the truth. The humans were not weak. They were unbreakable. And in that truth lay the greatest power of all. This was the story of how humanity showed the universe what it meant to survive and never give up. The aliens who laughed at humans were now silent, humbled by the strength of those they had tried to defeat. The universe would never forget what happened on Earth. And humanity, they had just begun.